The results for Miss Maine USA are in. This year's pageant has drawn more attention than in recent years due to two contestants. Former New England Patriots coach Bill Belichick's girlfriend, Jordan Hudson, ended up finishing in third place. And Maine's first ever transgender contestant, Isabel St. Cyr, made it into the final 10. The reigning Miss Maine, Ann Baldridge, was also on stage, and you might remember she is a former News Center Maine reporter. Ann officially passed her crown.
Pageant hopping isn't illegal, but it's wrong.
Hi, my name is Shelby Howell, Miss Multiverse America.
Maine, a place where I was born and raised. Unlike Miss Maine USA 2025, Shelby Howell. She is new to Maine as of 10 weeks ago. Let's get into it.
Hello, Tropicana Lifestyle. I'm Shelby Howell from the USA. I'm the winner from last year for Miss Cosmo World. I'm so excited to be back here in KL, and I'm so excited to see who the next winner is for Miss Cosmo World.
Hi, สวัสดีค่ะ I'm Miss Thailand, Miss Cosmo World 2024, and today I'm with Tropicana Lifestyle. Hi everyone, I'm Miss China. I'm Juno, 24 years old. Welcome to Miss Cosmo World 2024. See you in the final. Hello guys, I'm Miss Australia. My name is Valeria, and please support me, and I hope you're enjoying the most beautiful night.
The results for Miss Maine USA are in. This year's pageant has drawn more attention than in recent years due to two contestants. Former New England Patriots coach Bill Belichick's girlfriend, Jordan Hudson, ended up finishing in third place. And Maine's first ever transgender contestant, Isabel St. Cyr, made it into the final 10. The reigning Miss Maine, Ann Baldridge, was also on stage, and you might remember she is a former News Center Maine reporter. Ann officially passed her crown onto Shelby Ann Howell, representing Bangor. During one of the interview portions, Howell mentioned she was raised by a single mother, and it inspired her to start a nonprofit supporting single parents. She says she's now hoping her new title will help her continue that work.
I have worked so hard for this, so I'm genuinely really proud of my journey, and I want to be an inspiration for others as well. So this is just a great stepping stone.
Also interested in giving back to her community is the new Miss Maine teen, Jasmine Rainwerner from Seacoast. She says she runs a nonprofit for foster children inspired by her younger sister, who was in the foster care system.
Having the platform is amazing. It spreads more awareness. I'm doing drives at my studio, at school, and I think that having this platform is just going to give me that much more opportunity to continue my foundation's growth.
Later on in the year, both Rainwerner and Howell will represent Maine in the National Miss USA competition.
I know what you're thinking. Who am I to talk about beautiful people? Well, I'm going to anyway. I did some pretty extensive research into Shelby Howell. She won Miss Maine USA in 2025 on May 11th, just the other day. However, Bangor Daily News on the 12th of May posted an article talking about how her social media indicates that she is a born and bred and raised Californian, San Diego, in fact. She's a real estate agent with Keller Williams out of California. Her aunt lives here in Maine, in Bangor. Allegedly, this is all alleged, That's the mailing address that Shelby would have been able to use in order to become a resident of Maine and get a Maine driver's license, which allegedly, some people did some research into it, and it seems as if she does have a Maine ID, which is sus. The crowning of Shelby Ann Howell as Miss Maine USA 2025 on May 11th in Portland should have been a moment of unadulterated celebration. The pageant itself had garnered more than its usual share of attention, largely due to the participation of high-profile contestants such as Jordan Hudson, the girlfriend of the former New England Patriots head coach Bill Belichick, and Isabel St. Cyr, who made history as the competition's first openly transgender contestant. Yet almost immediately after Howell represented Bangor, received her crown, her victory became clouded by scrutiny concerning her connections, or lack thereof, to the state, as she was now set to represent on national stage. This report delves into the background of Shelby Howell, examines the questions surrounding her Maine residency, explores the contentious pageant practice known as state hopping, or pageant hopping, and analyzes the broader implications for the Miss Maine USA pageant and its contestants. Section 1. The crowning of Miss Maine 2025, a victor under scrutiny. Shelby Howell emerged victorious from a field that included notable figures, besting both Hudson and St. Cyr for the coveted title. However, public records indicate, and social media profiles quickly painted a picture of a winner with few discernible ties to the Queen City, or more broadly, to Maine itself. While the significant media focus on Hudson and St. Cyr may have initially deviated attention from the backgrounds of other competitors, Howell's win thrust her own victory into the spotlight, revealing apparent discrepancies that might have otherwise remained unexamined during the pre-pageant buzz. The speed with which these questions surfaced was notable. An article from Bangor Daily News published on May 12th, the very day after Howell's win, raised substantial doubts about her connections to Maine, suggesting that either journalists were already conducting background checks due to the pageant's heightened profile, or local observers were quick to flag inconsistencies. This rapid emergence of controversy underscored a perception that the issue of her residency was not a subtle one. Howell's victory, therefore, became less about the crowning itself and more about the subsequent questions regarding the legitimacy of her representation, bringing the practice of state hopping to the forefront of discussion in Maine. Section 2. Shelby Howell, a profile of the winner. An examination of Shelby Howell's background reveals deep and long-standing ties to California, contrasting sharply with her recent appearance on Maine pageant scene. One profile on the Keller Williams real estate website describes her as a lifelong resident of San Diego, California, the city where she was born and raised. This is further corroborated by information indicating she attended high school and college in California. Professionally, Howell is a real estate agent, but her license is held in California, and she is associated with Keller Williams in San Diego, California. Her modeling career also appears to be based primarily in California, with profiles on San Diego model management and backstage showcasing her work in that region. Howell is no newcomer to the pageant world. Her previous titles include Miss Cosmo World 2023, Miss Multiverse America 2019, and Miss El Cajon Teen USA. This extensive experience underscores her familiarity with the pageant system and its competitive landscape. Perhaps most telling is a statement she made in December 2024 interview with San Diego, California, Voyager magazine. In it, Howell articulated her next ambition: competing on the nationwide Miss USA title by entering a state pageant in 2025. This specific phrasing, entering a state pageant, is significant. For an experienced competitor and lifelong California resident, the typical path to Miss USA would be through Miss California USA pageant. Her expressed intent to enter a state pageant rather than specifically naming California or another state with which she had clear pre-existing ties strongly suggests that a strategic approach to selecting a state. This, coupled with her appearance in Maine just a few months later, lends considerable weight to the speculation that Maine was chosen for its perceived winnability, a hallmark of the state-hopping phenomenon. The first public documentation of her presence in Maine, an Instagram post from Bangor, appeared on March 1st, 2025. A relatively short time after her December 2024 statement about entering a state pageant. Furthermore, while her profession as a real estate agent is legitimate, her California-based license and San Diego Keller Williams profile raised questions about whether any professional activities in Maine were established primarily to satisfy a residency loophole, such as Miss Maine USA rule allowing eligibility for those who work full-time in your state. Currently, there is no readily available information suggesting significant established real estate work by Howell in Maine prior to the pageant, making this a pertinent area of inquiry when evaluating her residency claim. Section 3. Establishing Maine ties, residency in question. The timeline of Shelby Howell's documented presence in Maine leading up to Miss Maine USA 2025 pageant is notably compressed. Her first social media indicating she was in Bangor, Maine was dated March 1st, 2025. The Miss Maine USA pageant took place on May 11th, 2025. This places her first visible appearance in the state approximately 10 weeks or 71 days prior to the competition. Subsequent Instagram posts reportedly showed Howell engaging in activities such as dining in local restaurants and visiting downtown Bangor. Regarding official documentation, records from the Maine Bureau of Motor Vehicles indicate that Howell appears to have a Maine driver's license. Additionally, a Bangor resident named Christine Stewart came forward to identify Howell as her niece, providing a familial connection to the city. Beyond these points, however, her public connection to the state seems to stop there, according to one report. Pageant officials from the Clement organization, which produces the Miss Maine USA pageant, have stated that Howell met the necessary criteria. Ava Clement, assistant director of the organization, confirmed that Howell provided all the necessary or required documentation confirming her residency in the state of Maine. The Miss Maine USA rules stipulate that a contestant must live in Maine permanently and have lived there for at least 3 months prior to the pageant, or be a full-time student who will have completed a full semester by December 31st, or work full-time in this state. When questioned on how the 3 months residency is verified, Clement stated, "We trust the documents the contestants provided are true and accurate." The timing of Howell's arrival in relation to the residency rules is critical, as illustrated in the following table. I'll pull this up here so you can see. I don't necessarily need to read through it, but you can see she's in a state pageant in California in December 2024. Her first documented visit in Maine, March 1st. The competition, May 11th. The Miss Maine USA pageant, May 11th. Documented presence in Maine before pageant, only 71 days. Holy shit. I'm pulling up the table here, and I am realizing that Shelby has not lived in Maine for the 90 days that was stipulated. She's 19 days short. Look at the table here. If she can provide any documentation before March 1st, then maybe she can reach the 90 days. But the first indication of her being in Maine is March 1st. Miss Maine USA took place in May 11th. That's only 71 days. That's 19 days short. How did she even make it this far? The discrepancy between the documented 71 days of visible Maine presence and at least 3 months, approximately 90 days, requirement is a central point of contention. This suggests that either Howell was in Maine earlier, but this presence was not publicly documented, that the 3-month rule is interpreted with some flexibility, or that her qualification was met through an alternative clause, such as full-time work initiated shortly before or during this period. However, as previously noted, evidence of such full-time work in Maine has not been prominent. It's not available. The pageant organizers' reliance on trusting documents becomes particularly significant in this context. The nature of Howell's social media activity in Maine, dining out, visiting downtown areas, is consistent with those of a tourist or a newcomer acquainting themselves with an area. Such activities, while common, do not inherently demonstrate the establishment of deep, permanent community ties that might be expected from someone aiming to represent the state. This contrasts with the ideal of a state representative having genuine ties to the state and a desire to make an impact in your state, as articulated by former Miss Maine USA contestant Georgianne Oliver. While the presence of an aunt in Bangor does provide a nominal link to Maine, this familial connection does not, in itself, satisfy the permanent and primary residency requirement for Howell. It could, however, have facilitated the prominence of obtaining documentation, such as providing an address for mail, a method sometimes associated with establishing residency for pageant purposes. The existence of the aunt is a fact, but its significance in proving Howell's own genuine and permanent residency in Maine is debatable, without further substantiating evidence of her independent living situation and intent to remain. Section 4. State hopping, a contentious pageant practice. That is a mouthful. The controversy surrounding Shelby Howell's Miss Maine USA win has cast a spotlight on state hopping, a known yet whispered about practice within the pageant community. State hopping generally refers to contestants establishing residency, sometimes on a temporary or superficial basis, in a state perceived as less competitive or having more lenient residency requirements. The primary aim is to secure a state title, which is the gateway to national competitions like Miss USA. Georgianne Oliver, a former Miss Maine USA contestant, has described state hopping as a dirty little secret. Within the pageant world, she noted that it is particularly common for contestants from states with highly competitive pageant scenes, such as California or Texas, to target smaller states, often in the Northeast, where the field of competitors might be smaller or the overall pageant system less entrenched. Maine, in this context, has been cited as an example of a state that might be perceived as easier to win. The motivation is clear. a state crown is a prerequisite for the Miss USA stage, and for ambitious contestants, finding the most viable path to that crown is paramount. The rules governing residency are therefore crucial. The Miss Maine USA pageant produced by the Clement organization requires contestants to meet one of several criteria: live in Maine permanently and have lived there for at least 3 months prior to the date of the pageant, be a full-time student in Maine and have completed 1 entire semester or session by December 31st, or work full-time in Maine. The state-level rules are intended to align with the national Miss USA, Miss Universe organization guidelines. The official Miss USA state entry form provides more detailed stipulations, and I'll pull those up on the screen for you to see here. You can see permanent and primary residence, 3 bona fide documents, student work options, and you can see at the bottom a critical and perhaps underemphasized clause is the national rule state. Miss Universe reserves the right to review and evaluate the residency documentation if Miss Universe determines, in its sole discretion, that the documentation I submitted to fulfill my residency requirements was for the sole purpose of competing in the state pageant with no intention of maintaining my residency in the state. Miss Universe will have the right to take any action. A comparison highlights these nuances. And again, I'll pull up the slide here. Duration of residence, at least 3 months. And again, Shelby Howell was here for 71 days. That is all publicly available. If she was here longer than that, we have no publicly available information because I scoured the internet for this, social media and everything. So, the National Intent Clause is a powerful tool designed to prevent the very practice of establishing a superficial residency solely for competitive advantage. However, the persistence of state hopping as a dirty little secret suggests this clause may be difficult to enforce, inconsistently applied, or that state-level franchise organizations like the Clement organization, which runs Miss Maine USA, may not escalate such scrutiny if paper requirements are met. Their state policy of trusting documents creates a systematic vulnerability. If the initial gatekeepers at the state level do not rigorously investigate beyond the submitted paperwork, the national organization's ability to invoke the intent clause is hampered. This effectively outsources the critical initial verification to a system that acknowledges a trust-based approach rather than deep scrutiny of contestants' genuine long-term commitment to the state. The phenomenon of contestants moving from highly competitive, pageant-saturated states like California and Texas to smaller states in the Northeast where pageantry is less popular also points to an economic and cultural imbalance in the pageant landscape. This disparity creates an incentive structure where experienced, well-resourced contestants can strategically target states with perceived lower barriers to entry, further fueling the practice of state hopping. Section 5. The ethics and legality of state hopping. A central question in the discussion of state hopping is its legality. Current understanding, supported by commentary on the practice, suggests that state hopping, while ethically contentious, is not illegal. The primary legal consideration is whether a contestant has technically met the rules set forth by the pageant organization. If documents are provided that satisfy these rules, however minimally, no statutory law is typically violated. The issue, therefore, resides firmly in the realm of ethics and the integrity of the pageant system itself. The ethical arguments against state hopping are numerous and compelling. Chief among them is the principle of fairness to local contestants. Women who are genuinely from a state, who have invested in their communities, and who possess authentic local ties may find themselves at a disadvantage when competing against individuals who have strategically relocated, potentially with more resources or pageant experience, simply because their state is viewed as easier to win. This can deny opportunities to those who truly embody the spirit of state representation. Beyond fairness, there is an impact on community engagement and state pride. State pageant winners are traditionally expected to serve as ambassadors for their state, dedicating their year of service to local charities, community events, and representing the state values. When a winner has no deep-rooted connection to the state and potentially leaves shortly after the national pageant, or if their bid is unsuccessful, the state loses out on this vital year of representation and community benefit. As Georgianne Oliver remarked, there's a real benefit to someone with ties to the state representing the state. Conversely, she noted, where it's sad is when people may not actually be a part of our community at all. The pride that a community feels in seeing one of its own achieve such a title is inevitably diminished if the winner is perceived as an outsider. Perspectives from those within the pageant world underscore these concerns. One contestant who lost to a state hopper was quoted as saying, "Pageant hopping is wrong. It is not illegal, but it's wrong." This sentiment captures the ethical frustration even when rules are technically met. Fundamentally, state hopping erodes the core purpose of state representation. If a title like Miss Maine USA can be acquired by individuals with only the most tenuous or recent connections, the pageant risks being seen as a mere strategic game for national qualifications rather than a genuine celebration of state-specific talent, character, and community leadership. This aligns with broader criticism that pageants can sometimes be superficial, a concern that is amplified when the authenticity of representation is in doubt. The dilemma lies in the tension between the letter and the spirit of the residency rules. Contestants engaging in state hopping may meticulously meet the documented requirements, a lease for 90 days, a new driver's license, utility bills at a temporary house, or potentially a relative's house. However, they may simultaneously violate the spirit of the rules that imply a genuine, ongoing commitment and intent to make the state their permanent and primary home. The Miss USA National Organization's intent clause is an attempt to address the spirit, but its effective enforcement appears to be the primary challenge. For Maine, the implications are significant. If a local woman perceived the Miss Maine USA pageant as increasingly susceptible to out-of-state competitors who may have strategic advantages, it could foster disillusionment. This could, in turn, discourage local talent from participating, potentially weakening the Maine pageant's connection to its own community and, ironically, making it even more reliant on contestants from elsewhere. The user's query, do women who live in Maine now have to compete with people out of state? This seems wrong. Reflects this very real concern. Section 6. Miss Maine USA's platform, plans for the Pine Tree State. In the aftermath of her win, Shelby Howell has articulated her platform and intentions for her year as Miss Maine USA. During the interview portion of the pageant, she shared that her upbringing by a single mother inspired her to found a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting single parents. While the specific name of this nonprofit organization is not consistently mentioned in any available information, its mission is clear. Winning the crown on Mother's Day, she emphasized this personal connection to her cause. Looking ahead, Howell has stated her hope that Miss Maine USA title will enable her to expand her advocacy work and continue helping families throughout Maine. She also expressed the desire to be an inspiration, remarking, "I want to be an inspiration for others as well. This is going to be a great stepping stone." While a platform focused on supporting single parents is undoubtedly commendable and socially valuable, its planned implementation in Maine by an individual whose prior connection to the state appear limited will be a critical test. The authenticity of her commitment to serving Maine communities will be closely observed, particularly in light of questions about her residency and her own description of the title as a stepping stone. While stepping stone can refer to personal growth or broader advocacy, in the context of pageant ambitions and questionable residency, it can also be interpreted as viewing the state's title primarily as a means to reach Miss USA national stage. The absence of consistently named, verifiable nonprofit organization in the initial reports is a point to consider. A formally registered nonprofit with a documented history of activity, even if primarily based in California, would offer a more concrete foundation for her platform. Without such specifics, it's more challenging to assess the existing infrastructure of her initiative and how its operations might genuinely and effectively be extended to families throughout Maine. Also, continuing. She used the word continuing. Without significant new local partnerships and groundwork within the state. Ultimately, the success and sincerity of Howell's reign as Miss Maine USA, especially given the circumstances of her win, will likely be measured by her tangible on-the-ground impact within Maine. Her actions and engagement over the coming year will provide the most definitive answer to whether an individual accused of state hopping can nevertheless effectively and authentically serve the state they have been chosen to represent. This will be the true test of whether her commitment to Maine extends beyond the pageant runway. Section 7. Conclusion. Balancing ambition, rules, and representation. The case of Shelby Howell, Miss Maine USA 2025, encapsulates a complex interplay of personal ambition, pageant regulations, and a fundamental concept of state representation. The evidence strongly indicates that Howell's primary personal and professional ties are to California, her lifelong home. Her documented public presence in Maine commenced only about 10 weeks before the state pageant, a timeline that aligns closely with, if not slightly under, the minimum 3-month requirement documentations to establish residency. The circumstances raise legitimate questions about whether this fulfilled the spirit of establishing a permanent and primary home in Maine, as envisioned by national Miss USA guidelines. Howell, for her part, has expressed a commitment to using her platform to support single parents in Maine. We have yet to see that. Beyond this individual case, the controversy illuminates the broader, more ethically fraught issue of state hopping. In the pageant world, while not illegal, this practice demonstrably challenges the authenticity of state representation and can create an uneven playing field for local contestants who possess genuine, long-standing ties to their community. It forces a confrontation between a contestant's understandable ambition to compete at a national level and the ethical responsibilities inherent in representing a specific state and its people. This situation underscores a critical tension within the Miss USA system. This structure itself, where winning a state title is the sole path to Miss USA national competition, can inadvertently create pressure for highly ambitious contestants to seek out any state where they perceive a greater chance of winning. This is particularly true if their home state is exceptionally competitive. This systemic pressure, if not counterbalanced by rigorous and consistently applied residency verification at all state levels, can make state hopping an attractive, albeit ethically questionable, strategy. Pageant organizations, both at the state franchise level and national Miss Universe organization level, bear significant responsibility. The Miss USA national entry form contains an intent clause designed to address situation where residency appears to be established solely for competitive purposes. However, the continued prevalence of state hopping suggests this clause may be underutilized or difficult to enforce, especially if state-level organizations primarily rely on trusting the documents provided by contestants, as was stated in Maine's instance. Such a trust-based system appears insufficient to address the nuances of permanent and primary residency and a contestant's true intentions. It effectively places the burden of proving disingenuous residency on objectors or the organization, a high bar to meet when a contestant has supplied facially compliant paperwork. This allows for a degree of plausible deniability for both the contestant and the state organization that approved their entry. For Miss Maine USA pageant and for aspiring local contestants, these events may serve as a watershed moment. The perception that the title could be won by individuals with minimal, genuine connection to Maine risk alienating local talent and diminishing the pageant's values and relevance within the state. The Shelby Howell controversy is more than an isolated incident. It is a case study that could and perhaps should fuel calls for systemic reform. There is a clear need for greater transparency and more stringent, standardized enforcement of residency rules across all Miss USA state pageants. This would not only enhance the fairness of the competition, but also uphold the integrity of what it means to be state representatives, ensuring that the women wearing the Miss Maine USA crown or that of any other state truly embodies and is committed to the community she stands for. The ultimate balance lies in fostering a system that allows for ambition while safeguarding the authenticity of representation. Shelby Howell, congratulations for winning Miss Maine USA 2025. Although I don't see how you met the criteria, so I am going to continue to do some deep dive. So in that news, I say that Mara Carpenter is the true winner of Miss Maine USA 2025. Hot take? She was second up. She's actually from Maine. Mara Carpenter should be the winner. That's just my opinion. All of this is a legend. This is my opinion. I found all this information online. I am bad about including sources and whatnot, but I will be better about doing that in this video. It was longer, but it's also heated. And the more I researched, the more I got upset, because you think you can come into a state that is not as pageant saturated and you can just swoop up and take a crown? How? Who the hell do you think you are? Because in Maine, that's not a Maine value. You're trying to represent us as Mainers. That is not a Maine value. What you just did, not gonna cut it, okay? So I think we should have a recount. I think that Shelby Howell should be examined, investigated, and disqualified. And then we should move from there. There ain't no way people are gonna come into Maine and continually disenfranchise Maine girls and women. What the hell is going on in Maine? And I say that as someone that is born, bred, raised, lives in Maine right now. What the hell is going on? Because Our women and girls are being disenfranchised, taken advantage of, and blindsided in every which way. And, you know, I'm done not speaking up. So, this has been Drew Hoagland with Mainstream Current. Until next time, y'all.
Ready? Fight!
Peace.